My name is Claire Morgan, and I live in Seattle, Washington. My townhouse sits near Green Lake, painted a soft blue with white trim and a porch just wide enough for two chairs. I bought it for $615,000 after a decade of saving. When I turned the key for the first time, I felt proud, like I had finally built something of my own. It was more than a house. It was proof that hard work mattered, that I could stand without leaning on anyone. But the truth was, I had spent most of my life holding others up. My younger brother, Ethan, was always the golden one. My mother, Patricia, said he was creative, born with a poet's soul. My father, Henry, said he'd be a great entrepreneur one day, if people would just stop pressuring him. I was the pressure, apparently. I was the one who followed rules, who got up early, who made ends meet. Every time Ethan stumbled, the family turned to me. They said I had the stable job and the good head for money, as if those were crimes. At 20, I sent Ethan $300 a month for textbooks. At 22, I paid his spring tuition when his scholarship ran out. By 24, he had dropped out of school and moved to Chicago to find his sound. My parents couldn't afford to support him, so I co-signed his apartment lease and wired $1,100 a month to cover rent. He called it a loan, but no repayment ever came. I told myself I didn't mind. Family helps family, right? That's what I kept repeating, even when it hurt. I'd always been careful with money. I worked full-time as a financial analyst and freelanced in the evenings, helping small nonprofits balance their budgets. By 28, I had paid off my student loans and built a savings account of $42,000. That was also the year I met Daniel Walsh, a civil engineer from Denver, with calm eyes and a steady presence. He was the kind of man who didn't talk over me or make me feel small. We met at a friend's barbecue, and before the night ended, he offered me his jacket because the air had turned cool. It was a small thing, but it meant more than any grand gesture. Daniel loved the details. I thought no one noticed. He'd trace the lines in the stained glass on my front door and say it looked like sunlight frozen in color. He laughed when my stairs creaked, calling them the house's heartbeat. When I spoke about budgets, he listened, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. I'd never had that before. One evening, 2 years later, Daniel took me on a ferry to Bainbridge Island. The sun was setting, gold melting into water, when he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond ring that caught the last rays of light. I said yes before he could finish asking. We decided to get married in Boston, Massachusetts. My grandmother had left me a bracelet there, an antique gold piece with tiny pearls, and I wanted to wear it as a link to my family's past. We planned a modest ceremony, something elegant but not extravagant. Still, weddings are never cheap. I budgeted carefully, covering nearly every cost myself. $7,200 for the venue, $5,600 for catering, $4,800 for flights and hotel rooms for my parents, $2,400 for flowers, $3,900 for photography, and about $6,000 for other details. By the time I finished the spreadsheet, the total sat at $29,780. I rounded it to $30,000 and told myself love was worth the expense. A week before sending invitations, Ethan called. His voice was urgent, excited, full of the same charm he'd used since childhood. He said he had finally met a producer in Los Angeles who believed in him, but he needed $3,500 for a recording session. "It's the one shot I've been waiting for," he said. My parents called the next day, echoing his words. I hesitated, but guilt has a way of winning. I wired the money that Tuesday. Daniel found me at the kitchen counter that evening, staring at my banking app. "Another loan for Ethan?" he asked gently. I nodded. He didn't scold me, just said, "I hope he appreciates you one day." I smiled, though I knew deep down that appreciation wasn't something Ethan gave easily. As the wedding approached, my parents grew demanding. My mother wanted her hair done at a top Boston salon. My father complained about their hotel not being luxurious enough. I covered the upgrades, another $2,000 gone. Daniel noticed, but didn't say a word. His calmness was my anchor. 2 nights before the ceremony, I called my mom to confirm the seating plan. She seemed distracted, more concerned about Ethan's flight schedule than my rehearsal dinner. "He's your brother," she said. "He's been under a lot of stress. Be patient with him." That phrase, "be patient with him," had been the story of my life. When Ethan crashed my car in high school, I was told to be patient. When he missed our grandmother's funeral, I was told he was dealing with emotions differently. And now, on the edge of my wedding, I was still expected to carry his peace of mind. The night before I flew to Boston, I sat alone on my porch and watched the rain. The air smelled like cedar and wet concrete. I thought about the money I'd spent, the countless transfers, and the sacrifices I'd made. I told myself this wedding would mark a new beginning. I believed that once I said "I do," I could finally set boundaries, that love and family could finally exist without debt. Daniel joined me on the porch, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "This time next week," he said, "we'll be on a beach somewhere, no phones, no work, no stress." "Just us," I said. "Just us," he repeated. I leaned against him and let myself believe it. I didn't know then that within days, everything I had poured into making peace would come undone in a single, humiliating moment. I didn't know that Ethan would make my wedding his stage, or that the tab I'd been paying all my life was about to hit its final, brutal total. That night, I closed my eyes and pictured calm waters and white dresses. I hadn't yet seen the red wine that would stain it all. The morning of my wedding felt like sunlight had wrapped itself around the city. Boston was alive with sound, bells from distant churches, laughter from hotel balconies, and the soft shuffle of guests arriving early. I woke before dawn, staring at the ceiling of our suite at the Copley Plaza, trying to quiet the nerves that danced beneath my ribs. Daniel was still asleep on the couch across the room, following tradition to avoid seeing me in my dress before the ceremony. I watched him for a moment, steady and peaceful, before turning back to the window. The sky was clear, not a single cloud daring to interrupt the day I had imagined since we got engaged. When the stylists arrived, the room filled with curling irons, perfume, and chatter. My mother entered halfway through, wearing pearls and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She inspected everything: the flowers, the hem of my dress, the color of my lipstick. "Ethan's running a little late," she said. "He was up late rehearsing something with his friends." I didn't ask what that meant. I just nodded, pretending I didn't feel the weight of his constant chaos creeping into my day. The ceremony itself went perfectly. The music was soft, the vows heartfelt, and when Daniel slipped the ring on my finger, I felt my breath catch. For a few shining moments, I believed the rest of my life had truly begun. My parents clapped politely, Ethan cheered too loudly, and I ignored the slight slur in his voice as he hugged me. The reception was held in a red brick hall in the South End, decorated with white roses and warm lights that shimmered like stars. The air smelled of sugar and champagne. I wore my grandmother's pearl bracelet, the one she'd worn at her own wedding. Daniel held my hand as we cut the cake, and when we turned to toast, I caught Ethan leaning at the bar, glass in hand, whispering something to our cousin. His laughter was sharp and jagged. We had just begun our first dance when it happened. The music faded into applause, and I saw him pushing through the crowd, face flushed and eyes unfocused. "Oh, look at her," he said loudly, waving his glass. "The perfect daughter. The perfect bride." A few people chuckled awkwardly, assuming it was a toast. But then he kept talking. "You think you're better than everyone just because you can buy it all, huh? The dress, the venue, the attention. Must be nice to buy your happiness." My heart sank. "Ethan," I whispered, trying to calm him. But he stepped closer. The smell of wine hit me first, strong, sour, clinging to the air. Before I could move, he raised his glass high and poured it over me. The red wine splashed across my white satin gown like blood. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. The band stopped playing. For a second, everything was still except for the sound of liquid dripping onto the floor. I stood there frozen, my bouquet slipping from my hand, my grandmother's bracelet catching the light as the stains spread across my dress. Then the noise returned all at once. Guests whispering. Cameras clicking. My mother rushed forward, not to comfort me, but to grab Ethan. "He's just upset," she hissed, as if that made sense. My father joined her, placing a firm hand on Ethan's shoulder while glaring at me like I had provoked him. "Don't make a scene, Claire," he warned quietly, as though I was the problem. Daniel was the first to move toward me. He pulled me into his arms, his voice steady even as my hands trembled. "You're okay," he said. "We'll fix this." The look in his eyes wasn't pity. It was protection. Ethan wasn't done. He shoved the dessert table, sending cupcakes and plates crashing to the floor. "You owe me," he shouted. "All this money you have, it's mine too. Family money." His words echoed through the hall like poison. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. Security appeared and gently but firmly led him outside, while my parents followed, still shielding him. The humiliation burned more than the wine. I went to the powder room with Daniel. He found a towel, dabbing at the stains while I tried to steady my breathing. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, mascara smudged, dress ruined, shoulders shaking. "We can leave right now," Daniel said softly. "Forget the reception. Forget them." But I couldn't. I looked at him and whispered, "No. I won't let him take this from us, too." We went back out. I smiled for the remaining guests, danced with Daniel, and laughed where I could. Every cheer, every camera flash felt like a fragile defiance. I decided then that I wouldn't let their behavior define my happiness. I had spent too long cleaning up after Ethan's messes. This time, he could clean up his own. When the last song ended, the hall emptied slowly. I sat with Daniel near the cake table, our hands still linked. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A new bank alert. I frowned and opened it. The message said there had been a withdrawal, $10,000 from my honeymoon account. My breath caught. That account had been joint with my parents years ago, back when I'd helped them with Ethan's college bills. I'd never closed it. Daniel noticed my face. "What's wrong?" I called the bank immediately. The clerk confirmed the transfer to a dealership in Worcester. A used car purchase, registered in Ethan's name. For a long moment, I just sat there, silent. The wine on my dress had dried to a rusty brown. My grandmother's bracelet still gleamed under the soft light. I looked at it, then at Daniel. "They took it," I whispered. "My own family stole my honeymoon savings." He didn't ask why or how. He just put his arm around me. "Then that's the last thing they'll ever take," he said firmly. I nodded. The hall around us was nearly empty now, the chairs stacked, the lights dimming. I picked up a napkin and started making a list in the corner. Every account I needed to close, every transfer to cancel, every tie to cut. The stain on my dress had found its twin in my bank account. Both had been warnings I could no longer ignore. That night, as we left the hall, I realized something vital. The wedding had ended, but the reckoning was only beginning. Rain fell in thin silver lines over the Charles River, tracing quiet ripples across the water outside our hotel window. The city was hushed, as if it understood the storm brewing inside me. I sat at the small desk near the window, still wearing the silk robe the bridal suite had provided, my laptop open, coffee untouched. Daniel was standing behind me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. He didn't have to ask what I was doing, he already knew. I logged into my bank accounts first. My fingers shook, but my mind was steady. One by one, I canceled every automatic transfer that had been running for years. Tuition payments, rent coverage, and random deposits labeled help or emergency. I removed all linked external accounts and closed the joint sub-account that my parents had access to. That account had started as a safety net when Ethan was in college. Somewhere along the line, it had turned into a pipeline that drained me dry. The honeymoon account was next. The balance showed $12,400. That money was supposed to be for plane tickets to Italy for dinners by candlelight for our first week as husband and wife. Now, it was a reminder of what had been stolen. I moved it into a new account under my name alone. When the confirmation message appeared, I felt something in my chest uncoil, like an invisible knot finally loosening. Daniel brewed coffee and handed me a mug. "You don't have to do all of this today," he said softly. Yes, I replied. I do. Because if I wait, I'll find a reason to forgive them again.
He didn't argue.
He just nodded. At 9 sharp, I called my parents.
We need to talk, I said.
Meet me in the lobby in 20 minutes. My voice was calm, but inside, my heartbeat was like thunder. When they arrived, Ethan was with them, wearing a new leather jacket and a smug grin. My mother's face was tight, her lipstick too bright for the hour. My father looked impatient, like I had pulled him away from something important. Daniel sat beside me, his presence quiet but solid. I want to make this simple, I began. I know about the $10,000 taken from my honeymoon account for Ethan's car. My mother blinked, feigning surprise. Sweetheart, it's family money. You've always said. I raised a hand.
No.
That account was mine. You had no right to touch it. My father frowned. You're overreacting. We needed to help your brother get back on his feet. Ethan leaned forward, smirking. You act like it's the end of the world. You have plenty, Claire. What's 10,000 to you? I looked at him, then at my parents. You've all forgotten something important. Every dollar I've given, every tuition payment, every rent check, every bill, was from my work. Not yours. Let's review, shall we? I opened my folder. I had printed everything, transfers, receipts, and notes. I covered Ethan's tuition gap in his junior year, $8,900. His rent for 18 months in Chicago, $19,800. His move back to Portland, $2,600. Smaller transfers, groceries, utilities, personal expenses, another $7,000. Give or take. Add that to the $30,000 I just paid for a wedding where he humiliated me in front of everyone, and we reach a total of roughly $68,300. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw tightened. Ethan laughed, but it sounded hollow. I'm done, I said. My voice didn't shake. I'm done financing your mistakes. Money given without respect is theft, and that's exactly what this has become. So here's my boundary. There will be no more transfers, no cosigns, no loans, and no contact until the $10,000 is repaid and a full apology is made. My mother gasped. You can't just cut off your family.
I can, I said.
And I am. My father's voice turned cold. You're cruel. You wouldn't even be here without us. I met his glare. Maybe. But I also wouldn't still be standing if I'd followed your example. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. She's not being cruel, he said evenly. She's protecting herself. Something you should have done years ago, Claire. They tried to twist the story. My mother brought up love. My father talked about family loyalty. Ethan muttered about betrayal and greed. But for once, I didn't flinch. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and said, I wish you all well. But I won't keep paying for your comfort while you disrespect my life. As Daniel and I walked toward the elevator, I heard my mother call after me, her voice trembling with anger. You'll regret this, Claire. The elevator doors closed before I could answer. Daniel leaned his forehead against mine. Let's go home, he whispered. He meant Seattle, but he also meant something deeper, the home we'd build on peace, not guilt. Back in Washington, the first thing I did was repair my townhouse. It wasn't just about the house, it was about reclaiming control. I fixed the loose steps, replaced the cracked kitchen tiles for $1,200, and painted the dining room a soft gray that caught the morning light. Each change felt symbolic, like patching up parts of myself that had been neglected too long. I filed a fraud report for the $10,000. The dealership confirmed my parents' signatures, and though I knew it might take months, I wanted it on record. I changed my phone number, blocked their emails, and sent one final message. I love you, but I will not be used anymore. The account theft was the last line. If you ever wish to make things right, repay the $10,000, apologize in full, and seek help. Until then, I wish you peace. Then I turned off notifications and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. For weeks, I focused on small things, planting herbs on the windowsill, walking by Green Lake with Daniel, cooking dinner without my phone buzzing with requests. It felt like I'd been underwater for so long and was finally breathing fresh air. People like to say family comes first, but what they don't say is that sometimes you're the family that needs protecting. That morning in Boston wasn't just the day I closed bank accounts. It was the day I reopened my life. I didn't lose family. I lost a drain disguised as love. And in the quiet of my Seattle home, with Daniel's hand resting over mine, I finally understood what freedom feels like. It doesn't roar. It hums, steady and soft, like rain against the window when you know you'll never drown in it again. The silence that followed my decision was short-lived. Within a week, the pressure began. It started with a Facebook post from my aunt in New Jersey about daughters who forget where they come from. Then came a cousin in Ohio tagging me under a post about gratitude and family unity. Old friends from Portland messaged links to my parents' public pleas, filled with half-truths about a misunderstanding and a daughter who had turned her back on them. Ethan, of course, was louder than all of them. He uploaded a video titled "Family Should Share," pretending to be heartbroken while hinting that I had stolen from him. He talked about loyalty, about how success had made me selfish. The comments section was filled with sympathy for him and venom for me.
I didn't respond.
I had nothing left to explain. Instead, I let my silence speak. Every time I felt the urge to defend myself, I opened the folder where I'd stored my financial records, the one that showed every transfer, every tuition payment, every check I'd written in good faith. I reminded myself that truth doesn't need performance. It just needs peace. Daniel stood by me through it all. He handled each wave of drama with quiet grace. When my parents' lawyer sent an email requesting a conversation to mend the family relationship, Daniel drafted a single reply for me to review. The terms remain unchanged. Full apology, repayment of $10,000, and proof of counseling for all parties involved. Until then, no contact. We sent it and never heard back. That same week, Daniel's mother, Elaine Walsh, called from Denver. "Dinner's at 6, she said, her voice warm and firm. "And I promise, no one will be throwing wine at you." When we arrived, her table was set with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and lemon pie. The first thing she did was hug me, no conditions, no questions. "You're family now," she said. "And around here, we treat family with kindness." It was a simple sentence, but it felt like oxygen. Work became my refuge. I poured myself into it with renewed focus. I accepted a new role managing a grant portfolio for environmental nonprofits across Washington and Oregon. 3 months later, I negotiated a $1.2 million partnership between our firm and a museum in New York City, a project that would fund sustainable design programs for young architects. My boss raised my salary to $118,000 and introduced a year-end bonus plan. I finally felt seen not as a resource, but as a professional who had earned her place. I learned to set boundaries at work the same way I had at home. When I was off the clock, I was truly off. My phone stayed in a drawer. Evenings were reserved for walks around Green Lake with Daniel, for cooking, and for rediscovering calm. By the time autumn arrived, we finally took our postponed honeymoon. London greeted us with soft rain and cobblestone streets. We spent afternoons in old bookstores and evenings at cafes, where the coffee was strong and the laughter easy. From there, we traveled north to Edinburgh, where the city lights shimmered against castle walls and the air smelled like wood smoke and possibility. Every receipt, every meal, every ticket was paid for with our own money. It was ours, untouched and untainted. Back in Seattle, I noticed the difference in myself. The guilt that had followed me like a shadow began to fade. I stopped waiting for the next crisis call. I stopped replaying the wedding in my head. Peace didn't come as a thunderclap. It arrived like morning light, soft and steady, one day at a time. Meanwhile, reality caught up to Ethan. Without my transfers, he had to move out of his fancy apartment and rent a small studio in Worcester. He took a warehouse job to make ends meet. His music plans stalled when the dealership repossessed the car I had unknowingly funded. My parents weren't doing much better. Without the financial cushions I used to provide, their credit card bills piled up and late fees became a regular guest at their door. They reached out once more through their lawyer, but I stood firm. My terms hadn't changed. Your boundaries are strong, the lawyer said in his reply. I wish more clients could be this clear. Peace requires clarity, I wrote back. Winter came quietly that year. One December afternoon, I was stirring pasta in the kitchen while rain tapped against the window. Daniel walked in holding the mail, a mix of bills and holiday cards. Among them was a plain white envelope with my parents' return address. My heart thudded once, then twice. I opened it slowly. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000 and a short handwritten note. We were wrong. We are sorry. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I simply folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and set the check on the counter. Daniel looked at me, waiting. What will you do with it? He asked.
Nothing, I said.
Not yet. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I set the table for two. The house was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the clinking of silverware. The soft gray walls of the dining room reflected the glow of the lights above us. The air felt still, peaceful, mine. I thought back to the girl who had spent years keeping everyone else afloat, believing that love meant sacrifice. She had paid her family's bills, carried their debts, and worn their guilt like armor. But now, she was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that protecting your own home isn't cruelty, it's courage. I still keep my spreadsheet. Old habits die hard. One tab tracks our savings, mortgage, and household repairs. Another tab is titled Lessons. Under it, a single line reads, Paid in full. Whenever the old guilt knocks, when a relative posts another passive-aggressive message, or when I pass a family photo in an old album, I look at that line. Then I close the laptop, walk over to Daniel, and let the sound of rain against the window remind me, this quiet, this peace, this freedom, it's all mine. Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's a leak that drains everything good. Love with boundaries is a house that stands through any storm. And for the first time in my life, I know my house will never fall again.